Welcome back to the third week's lectures of Better Leader, Richer Life. Our focus now is on being whole by respecting your most important people. In the previous videos this week, I talked about identifying your key stakeholders and understanding your mutual performance expectations. Now, we're going to explore them as a system. We're going to think about the boundaries between the different domains and understand typical patterns of stakeholder relationships. All of this will help you generate ideas for experiments that you can try in order to pursue four-way wins, improved performance in all the domains, later on in the course. Our emphasis on the mutually reinforcing influences of the different parts of your life gets to one of the most significant changes that can happen as a result of your investment in our course. That is, you get smarter about what it means to be whole, to fit the pieces of the puzzle that is your life into a coherent, integral system, one that you have greater control over. What do you see when you review your stakeholder analysis? Do you see how the parts really do affect each other? You might start to see more clearly where the boundaries are between the parts and how important it is to manage them. A boundary is anything marking a limit. Here, we use the term to denote the mark between different domains of life. Boundaries between domains vary in how permeable they are, whether they are open or closed to blending, and in how flexible they are, whether or not they're easily changed. It's possible to play with boundaries by combining, or on the other hand, by segmenting different domains. Victor, a former student, saw this possibility. Here's what he said. I'm beginning to see how important it might be to address the boundaries between the different domains of my life. I need to create stronger boundaries between domains that will allow me to focus on what matters most at any given time, but also ensure that my boundaries don't keep me from satisfying stakeholder interests that cross domains. So Victor is engaging here in the creative process of transformation. He realized how he might practice being both psychologically and physically present, and thus more effective in a given role, which would in turn make him feel better about his performance, feel more satisfied, and feel a positive impact across the different domains of his life. Jenna, another student, saw for the first time how stakeholder performance expectations affect each other when she thought about what she saw in her analysis. She said that identifying what she thought her stakeholders expected of her was a revelation. It made me realize that what my family really needs from me is acceptance. For instance, my father and sister are so different from me, and I often find it difficult just to accept them for who they are. So I try to compensate by being especially attentive towards them in other ways. Clearly, they're after something else, and I have to figure out how to meet their legitimate expectations. At work, I'd never really thought, at least in any systematic way, about how the people I manage rely on me, not just for day-to-day supervision, but they also look to me as an enabler of their success. I was excited to realize that it is true that we all feed off of each other's successes, which means that their expectation that I succeed is not just an expectation, but something they need. Jenna's realizations are steps toward being more whole. You're demonstrating integrity when you respect your key stakeholders. You can't make this happen unless you know what you expect of each other. Your journey towards becoming the leader you want to be requires taking this time to think through your perceptions of stakeholder expectations. So as you do so, new opportunities to improve performance will start to come to mind. For example, you might come up with ideas for managing boundaries more effectively, such as by protecting some time for being with your spouse, and then helping people at work to understand why this time is needed, and, this is crucial, how this boundary that excludes your attention to work might, paradoxically, serve to improve your performance at work. In other words, in this example, you might discover that there is a benefit to your boss for you to have protected time with your spouse when you're not thinking about work at all. How would this happen? Well, because you'd be noticeably less distracted and more psychologically present when you were at work. This is just one simple example, and it might not apply to you at all. But these questions that I'll ask you to consider in your assignment this week will help you to develop insights for creative action that are suited to your situation. Here are the questions. In which domain are you doing best in meeting expectations? Where are you doing worst? Is the solution to be found with you or them? Which relationships would be easiest to change and why? Which would be hardest and why? How can you improve satisfaction and performance in one domain by improving performance in other domains? For example, how might you improve your work performance by strengthening connections with people in your community or at home? Your answers will help you to see that your stakeholder relationships are all part of a whole and help you to notice connections between the parts of that whole. What happens in one domain, or even with a single stakeholder, affects the others. And as a leader, you can influence whether this mutual impact is beneficial or not. You can take action to close what I call stakeholder performance gaps. To find your gaps, compare the performance ratings for your stakeholders on the two sets of analyses, the outside-in view, what they need from you, and the inside-out view, what you need from them. Any number short of 10 in either direction indicates a gap. The largest possible gap for any stakeholder, of course, would be where you scored a 1 for both you and your stakeholder. The really interesting question, again, is this. How can you improve performance in one domain by changing something in another domain? For example, how by being a better father do I become a better manager? How would improvement in the quality of my relationships with my friends make things better for my family and for my business, as well as for myself? How would better physical health improve my productivity at work? Discovering answers to these kinds of questions is, in essence, an inquiry into how to produce greater integrity in your life. Now, most people think in terms of zero-sum balance solutions to the dilemma of how to integrate the various roles they play. In this course, I'm encouraging you to think differently, which can take a bit of imagination. I'm asking you to open your mind to all the possible ways by which your goals, interests, and values in one domain benefit those in others. So not only can you create harmony among domains, but you can improve performance in them by transferring assets, your skills, the values you develop, the connections you have from one part to another. You can produce what researchers call positive spillover. For example, when you're feeling good about how you're performing as a parent, you can feel good and more focused in other parts of your life, at work or with your friends. Many people report that improving performance at home, in the community, and in themselves personally results indirectly, again by way of this positive spillover, in their being more productive and performing better in their business life. Some students, at least in the beginning, tend to focus on changes that they want to make at work, and they ignore the other domains. I sometimes have to prod them to adopt a broader, multiple domain perspective. If you're intent on discovering four-way wins, then it can't all be about work. It's essential that you look for opportunities for realizing benefits in all the four domains. And if it's simply looking for performance gains within one or another part of your life, if you're only looking to make changes at work, for example, or only looking to make changes in your home life, then it really doesn't fit with the goals of our course. We're looking at the whole. Here's more of what Victor said. My gut reaction was first to focus on fixing things at home, since it's the area that's bothering me the most, but I thought about it some more. Wouldn't that be focusing on the symptom and not the cure? I probably have to focus on home and on self at the same time, and I know I need to be thinking about how this will affect work and community, even if it's indirect. The key here is going to be doing this without introducing yet more competing demands on my limited time. I need to identify things that aren't onerous and that somehow make things better in all the different parts of my life. Victor is drawing practical lessons from his diagnoses and starting to think about how to apply these lessons to the design of his experiments. He has absorbed what is one of the most critical ideas in the total leadership approach. The point of this whole process is to reduce stress and increase performance. The big idea in this course is that if you look at your life as a whole and if you pursue experiments in how you think and act while getting others to see how it's in their best interests to support you, you will succeed in producing results with fewer trade-offs. Things will get better and you'll feel more like the navigator of your life because you'll have learned how to be one in a way that works for you. Raj, a recent participant in this course, summed up what this meant for him. By improving performance in one domain, my self-worth and confidence increases. My leadership profile improves. This enables me to take action in other domains, whether it is family or career or community. I can see how improving satisfaction and performance in one domain can improve the other domains. I mentioned earlier that many people report their lowest satisfaction is with their self. And I've observed that it's quite possible, even fun, to try new ways of spending more time on your physical and spiritual well-being, for example, to be more relaxed and more effective and to perform better in your other domains. Not long ago, I ran a workshop for a group of National Football League players here in Philadelphia. Some of them took up meditation as their experiments, with the intent of improving their performance in all the other domains of their lives, including at work as football players. Now, we'll get to your experiments before too long. Hang in there. For now, let me suggest an optional activity that you review your stakeholder analysis once you've done the assignment for this week with classmates, friends, family members, or colleagues who you can trust to talk about these things. They can serve as coaches who can, through their caring questions, help you identify the dynamics of your stakeholder interactions in ways that you can't see on your own. In addition, coaches are able to offer suggestions that you can take action on for improving your ability to meet stakeholder expectations better. And of course, you can do the same for them. And that, in turn, helps you further your understanding of yourself. As you think about whether you and your stakeholders are meeting one another's expectations, it's helpful to differentiate between impulsive reactions to stakeholder expectations and more thoughtful approaches, more leadership approaches to the patterns that you see in these central relationships. Let me tell you about the patterns that I've observed. These patterns of stakeholder dynamics based on the different kinds of possible gaps. I've arrayed them on this graph based on whether or not you're meeting each other's expectations. There's the explosive pattern in which expectations are hardly being met in either direction. What would a leader do to keep such a relationship working? Clarify mutual expectations, reframe them, and innovate. Try new ways of getting things done. Too often, people react impulsively to an explosive situation and they run away from it, even when they know it would be better if they tried to make it work. Then there's the angry pattern, in which you feel as if you're doing well for others, but they are letting you down and so you're hurt. The impulsive reaction here is often to turn resentment inward and feel bad about yourself, or strike out verbally. Some people do both. Again, a more productive response would be to clarify your own expectations with your stakeholders, explain the consequences for you and for them of these unmet stakeholder expectations, and then, if they are acceptable, well, accept the limits, accept the limitations, but consciously. You've thought about it, you've talked about it. In my experience, many students find themselves trapped in the third pattern, the psychological pressure cooker, in which they put too much pressure on themselves by inaccurately inflating the expectations that others have of them. This is the one that I call the guilty pattern, where you think people are doing right by you, but you're letting them down. Doing more of the same thing, but just trying harder, which is a kind of impulsive response to this pattern, it often leads only to increased stress and strain and burnout. Asserting leadership here, again, means clarifying expectations, which can be very liberating. In fact, that's often the case. Students often discover in their dialogues that the expectations others have of them are actually lower than they had imagined. And this leads to lower stress and smart changes in the distribution of their attention, in their actions.
Biggest surprise for me was people had actually lowered their expectations, which is a little surprising. I had always run around thinking that everybody had, you gotta meet this goal. And Basil, what are you doing here? What are you doing with this? And I remember going up to the controller in our company. I was like, Bill, let's have this talk. And he's like, what are you talking about? And when we sat down and actually got down to it, he was like, I just haven't been bringing, things to you because I knew you were busy. I didn't have any expectation that you would be able to meet these goals. And I was just really shocked because this whole time I'm running around thinking, I'm spinning my wheels. I'm not meeting the goals. I'm not pushing deliverables down to him that he needed to make decisions. And the whole time he was like, no, I sort of off-sourced that to somebody else. And so that was a real relief.
Of course, it doesn't always turn out this way, and each case is different, as yours will be. Sometimes what you find in your dialogues is that people actually want more of you than you thought. Fortunately, this outcome generally occurs less often. But even if it does happen, even if you do find out that they want more of you than you thought they did, wouldn't you rather know? As a leader, don't you want to know the realities you're dealing with in trying to get important things done with people who matter? I think you do. The opposite of explosive is the expansive pattern, where both parties are fully meeting each other's expectations. This is not as common as we'd like, but if you see it, what would you do? Well, I recommend reflecting on how you got there so you can continue to build on it and deepen your knowledge of how to cultivate productive relationships like these expansive ones. Okay, let's now turn to the last video in this week's lecture about how you use the different media available to you to connect with the people in your life.